Hello and welcome to another episode of But Why, the podcast that's all about digging into big questions and tricky topics via honest conversations. This week we're going to be looking at gut health, and I'm chatting to twin sisters Lisa and Alana McFarlane. Have I said that right? How do you say
McFarlane.
McFarlane. There you go. I knew that would be wrong. Okay. I'm chatting to twin sisters Lisa and Alana McFarlane, who have successful careers as DJs and presenters of the Mac Twins. Their twinness also led to an important twist in their career. In 2017, they took part in a groundbreaking piece of research led by expert in genetics and nutrition, Professor Tim Spector of King's College London, which looked into whether gut health is determined by genetics or environmental factors, which we'll talk about more in a second. Off the back of that, they started a website, my brain's gone from back-to-back talking, sorry. Off the back of that, they started a website, thegutstuff.com, with the aim to empower gut health in everyone, and have since grown an expert team of scientists, nutritionists, dietitians, and doctors to keep us all on the right side of the tracks when it comes to the bullshit versus the real shit and everything else in gut health, which I, for one, if I'm honest, am a bit clueless about. So without further ado, let's get cracking with the episode. 3 questions for you both before we begin. They're both quite, well, your answers are going to be the same for some of it, but not others. How are you really? What star sign are you? And what's your favourite crisp?
What excellent question. Amazing. I will actually be intrigued to see if our crisps or flavours are the same. How am I really? I think I've sounded a bit like what you've got, this like cold thing that you just feel extremely sorry for yourself, but it's not COVID, so nobody else feels sorry for you.
But if you've got the same cold that I've just had, and I've had COVID twice, this cold is bad. And I was just like, have I just forgotten?
My husband just said that. He was like, you're not giving me any sympathy. And I think it feels worse than COVID did the second time. I was like, all right, fine. But yeah, it is pretty bad. But I think our immunity went down.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was the second question?
How are you ready? What star sign are you?
Yeah, we're Taurus. We were meant to be Gemini, but we were 5 weeks early, so we stumped that a bit. Yeah. And then favourite crisp, salt and vinegar discos all day, every day.
Yeah, I was going to, or squares.
They're similar texture.
I mean, I'm partial. The corner shop near me, I've moved house recently, has got the best selection of 90s crisps. Yes. Space Raiders, squares, like the whole hog. They're missing frisps.
And how much do they cost these days for a packet of
I think 30p I maybe paid 30-40p. Used to be 10p.
Because I was going to say 3 times price increase.
Yeah,
this is like totally hashtag gut health.
Yeah.
But I was at a wedding recently. No, it wasn't recently actually. It was pre-COVID, which was a lifetime ago. And at night time, instead of a buffet, they just had like rows of boxes of 90s crisps. Genius, because everyone was like hammered and just smashing the crisps in. It's just, what an amazing idea. And it probably was so much cheaper than, what was it, like a bacon butty that nobody eats.
Yeah,
so it's such a good idea.
Absolute genius. Mm-hmm. Absolute genius. So fun, so cheap, so effective, because you just want to try and soak up some of the booze.
Exactly. Just went so well with the vodka that I was having as well.
The thing is, given the free reign over those kind of crisps, I would think I could eat quite a lot of them.
Oh, 100%. You'd start to get annoyed by how small the packages were. Do you know what I mean? It's like remember like Freddos and Tazzies as well. Packet of Space Raiders and a Freddo or a Taz, 15 pence maximum.
I mean, we're sounding really old, but
I know.
But it's true. It was cheap back in the day, wasn't it?
Yeah. What else? That was how I really am.
Yeah.
I've got a rager today. I don't know why. When you're just in a raging mood, you don't know why. Alana's had the brunt of it already. That could be it.
That's it. Lisa always goes crazy with a full moon. I literally sent her a thing on Teams just with like a gif with someone going poo-wee.
Change your attitude.
Like, your attitude. Poo-wee.
That it must be so interesting for you guys to work together and be as close as you are. I imagine you can just be unbelievably frank with one another.
I mean, honestly, like we've got like 10 members of staff now, and I've recently had a baby, so I'm not in the office a lot, but I was in on Tuesday, and they were just like they were just so savage to each other, and they're just like, oh my god, I forgot how savage you are to each other in person. But then a couple of minutes later, we're absolutely fine.
But yeah, you kind of do. You feel like there's no editing yourselves for one another?
No filter whatsoever. And both our husbands always say you can't treat us like you treat each other because we do exactly the same with them.
Yeah, because you've got a kind of a relationship that no one else would have in
Yeah.
terms of the extremity of your closeness. Even
Mhm.
your partner's it's different.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's interesting about the star sign thing as well, because Alana is a Taurian over the back, like logic. She's like a metronome, just like,
Yeah.
and her whole mood is just straight down the line the whole time. Whereas I am very much the mood swing, frenetic nature of a Gemini. And
how big a time gap was there between your births?
14 minutes. So yeah, my mum gave birth to us through the veg, and yeah, fair play to her. She said like after I came out, she was like, "Can you keep the other one in, please? Like, they can stay in
But
there."
then I turned round because Alana was like left. Then she took all the white blood cells with her and was like, "Smell you later." And I turned round like, "Wee space" when she left. And then came out like they couldn't get me out, and I was blue because obviously she tried to kill me by taking all the white blood cells. And you're, forever in my debt. I feel had to have a blood transfusion and all sorts.
I mean, it's Lisa over the back, like always bringing the drama. Do you know what I mean? Like, just get yourself out.
But astrology-wise, that will probably mean that your birth charts are different. That's a significant enough gap if you know, so there will be some differences, I think.
Could explain a lot.
Yeah. But that is so funny. Twin 1, twin 2, you've had quite a different... Or do they decide twin 1, twin 2 when you're in the womb? It's not to do with when you're born?
Well, one grows quicker, I think, and the other one's sort of cupped in, and then the other one catches up, I think. But
my mum said, like, scans back in those days, she was like, "You're just like two wee blobs," you know what I mean? Like, she was like amazed at like all the 4D scans and that now. She was like, "Yeah, we knew nothing." She was like, at one point, I thought you were one boy. And then they thought that we were two boys, and then we came out and they were like, "Oh, it's two girls." We were kind of completely off the mark.
Really?
Yeah, we were meant to be called Greg and Murray.
That's so funny. Oh my word, what a shock.
I know.
Yeah.
Good on her for doing vaginal delivery. Well, actually, that is kind of a seamless link, because tell me about the quite well-renowned study that you did for twins in 2017, was that?
Yeah, it feels like yesterday and 100 years ago, but we basically volunteered for twin research because, well, we were obviously DJing at the time, so couldn't have been further from health and wellness, put it that way. Living a fairly hedonistic lifestyle on vodka and late nights. And, we were brought up in working class Scotland, so we didn't eat an avocado until we moved to London. So we definitely weren't into nutrition at that point, but we volunteered for twin research mainly because we had different health pathways growing up. So Alana had arthritis when we were younger. I had really bad acne, and we knew we were identical, but we just wondered what the cause of these different things were.
Yeah.
And I was meant to do medicine at uni, and Alana was meant to do business and law. So actually, our obituaries will make sense, but it feels a bit random right now. But we were just super fascinated by the science. So we volunteered for twin research, and you get everything tested there, everything from like bone density to mental dexterity, of which Alana's bones are denser and I'm more mentally dexterous. Apparently.
Who's going to live longer?
Yeah, exactly. And Tim, so that the American Gut Project was just starting to happen in the States because they realised that they could use the same technology they use for like DNA sequencing to sequence this new thing called the microbiome, which was starting to kind of hurtle into science. And Tim was like, "Do you guys want to have your guts? We wanted the first to have your guts analysed as part of this." And we were like, "Yeah, sure, Tim. What do we have to do?" Well, first we were like, "What do you mean our beer bellies?" And he was like, "You have to send your poo off in the post every day for 2 months. You have to have a couple colonoscopies." Didn't realise how invasive that was until we signed the waiver form, and we're like, "Oh my god." And they put us on exactly the same diets. One, we had to only eat processed food and drink alcohol for a month. He was like, "Is there a time of the year that would be good?" And we were like, "The Edinburgh Festival." So we did that. And the second one, we just had to have like loads of fibre and all the key principles that we actually have at the gut stuff now. And it turns out that even though we have 100% the same DNA, our gut bacteria was only around 30% the same, so the same as strangers. Wow. That's kind of how we got into it. And then we just were really fascinated because we weren't just meeting, gastroenterologists and people that study digestive health. We were meeting immunologists, the head of Parkinson's research, psychologists, and going, right, this microbiome thing is a lot wider spread. So yeah, and then we just set up the gutstuff.com basically because our pals were like, 1 minute you're interviewing people at the British Red Carpet for your radio show, and the next minute you're at Reading University talking about probiotics. What the hell's going on? And we were just like, oh, that gut stuff. And yeah.
And also, it just completely turned on its head everything we thought about health and health or diet. Like, we were the type of, people in our 20s, as most of us are, I think, were thinking about, diet was something that you did 2 weeks before you went on holiday. The cabbage soup diet pre-Magaluf 2005, Atkins, all these sort of nonsense diets. And, we were like, hold on a minute. If we as identical twins can't be sold the same diet or lifestyle, then how can everyone be sold? And at the time, it was all this sort of clean eating, whereas what worked for one person should work for everyone. And we were like, hang on a minute, that the science isn't showing that. And we just became super passionate about getting the word out there, really.
And just to go back a step, when we say gut health, what is it that we're referring to? Is there kind of a neat way of explaining that?
We're getting better at it, but it's hard. Well, I think, obviously when we talk about gut health, we're talking about the health of our gastrointestinal tract. So like everything from mouth to bum. And the kind of thing that we've known, like how we digest and absorb food. But there's this whole new thing called the microbiome.
Well, it's not new, but we're starting to learn more.
We're starting to learn more about what it is. And basically it is, pathogens, bacteria, fungi, and viruses that live in, around, and on us. And the reason that we talk about them, you can get skin microbiome, we talk about them in relation to gut health because most of them live in our large intestine because it's moist, it's soggy, and they quite like it there. We thought when we first started the research that they actually outnumbered our human cells 10 to 1. But actually it's looking more like 1.3 to 1 as the science starts to emerge. But they do loads of amazing things. They, regulate our blood sugar levels. They teach our immune cells. They do so much great stuff for us, and science has started to uncover why we need to be looking after them more, because particularly in Western culture, we've done everything that we can to try and kill them off in terms of over-sanitization, antibiotics, sedentary lifestyles. So yeah, it's something that, and I think that's, when we came into gut health, it was like, actually, yes, there is a lot of people that have digestive issues that are on the rise. 1 in 4 people have them. Every time we talk to them, we're like, oh, I've got IBS, or my partner's got IBS. But also this microbiome piece means that we need to start to look after that from an overall well-being perspective too. So I think that's why the category and the interest is growing so quickly, because it encapsulates pretty much everything.
Yeah, it feels like it's kind of at the center of well-being, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the amazing thing about the microbiome is, like, we wouldn't be alive without our microbiome, and it's quite overwhelming to think about it because we were 80s babies, everything, all bacteria was bad, and get out. And actually, this idea of that we almost see it like pets or like a rainforest, like that they're actually working for us as well. It's quite a lot to get your head around, and it was pretty overwhelming for us as well initially.
Yeah, and it's weird, isn't it? Well, I'm sitting here like this because I feel like well-being and general health is something I've got a relatively good grasp on, or you feel like you do, and then you think, oh no, this is this whole world. And because I've been researching this podcast, once you start like tuning into it, it feels like it comes at you from everywhere, within everything, and it's like, oh right, this is a huge piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, and I think that's what that's what kind of was the fire in our bellies as well, because we were like, not only is this like, a well-being trend and something that we should be listening to, it's potentially the future of healthcare for a lot of things. Like, all the research that's going into clinical practice around the microbiome is incredible and overwhelming. And that's what we kind of got the fire in our bellies, because it was very much at the back of health food stores and in particular types of newspapers and magazines that people were talking about this. And we were like, the people that need it most aren't getting this information. And it actually, all the tips and the stuff that scientists were telling us wasn't like a magic expensive pill. It was really super simple stuff that we can all do, and you can change the makeup of your microbiome within days. And I think that's really empowering. It's a really empowering thing for everyone. So that's what kind of, got us away from the decks and into microbes.
I mean, it's quite the career shift, isn't it?
It feels so illogical, but then when if you'd been living our every day, it just sort of makes sense.
Yeah, that's how it happened.
Yes.
So, like, at the crux of that main study was trying to unpick how much is environmental and how much is genetic, and what has been the kind of conclusions on that, if there is such a thing.
So there you go.
Cheat. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, your microbiome is affected by so many different things. Diet is one of the main things, but you know, where you live in the world plays a huge part, and that was one of the big things that came out of that study. Movement, you know, lifestyle in general, sleep, pace, and then when you start to piece all these things of everything that affects it, it is quite literally everything. And you know, when you look at it, it's like, oh wow, you know, everything's affecting it, and I don't know where to start first. But I think, you know, it's a good thing that lots of things affect it, because it means you can do lots of simple changes to do that. And we changed the makeup of our microbiome in the study in 2 weeks, which is really exciting.
Wow. And I'm right in thinking that even how you're delivered, how you're born, so coming down, this is me not being a scientist, a vaginal birth would mean that you've got exposure to some microbiome, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, and Alana, obviously, like, I never thought I'd be the sort of person that was like, and are you getting a vaginal swab if you have a C-section? Just like, what the hell? But yeah, and that, you know, how you're born, because you get the microbes from your mum when you come out, and also if you're breastfed, can also affect it. It's hard. It's a hard thing to talk about, actually, and we've sort of resisted talking about it a lot with the gut stuff, because I think mums have enough guilt as it is, and you know, it's almost better to focus on the things that you have within your control now, and what you can do from the baby up to 3 years when their microbiome's starting to take shape, rather than how they were born. But it's amazing the links.
But you can, as you just referenced, if you are going to have a cesarean birth, you can ask for a vaginal swab, can't you? Would that be a fairly normal thing to request?
Seemingly it is now. Like, when I gave birth to my daughter, my hostel were a bit like, what? But actually, friends that have had babies in other regions, like even in Scotland, have been like, oh yeah, my midwife actually mentioned it to me, to put into birth plan. So yeah, I'm not sure how sort of widespread it is now in the UK, but certainly in other countries it's pretty common.
Really. And then as you say, we've got enough riding on both those things, on births and breastfeeding anyway. But it is also important to understand that's where this journey begins, isn't it? So early on. And then you mentioned, how would exercise impact your microbiome?
So
yeah, so one of the sorry.
Now you go.
Go, Liz. No, you go. Okay.
No.
One of the studies that was done on exercise and the diversity of bacteria in your gut. So we don't really know what a good gut and a bad gut looks like, which is the big question that everyone always asks us. But they think that a more diverse microbiome leads to better health outcomes. So with this study, they studied people on it doing exercise, and it wasn't specific of what exercise they did. They just did the exercise for 6 weeks. The diversity of their microbiome increased as soon as they stopped that exercise. The diversity of their microbiome went back to baseline.
Wow.
And we always talk about the gut stuff. We do a lot of corporate wellness talks, and you know, when we do those talks, we've done them everywhere from, you know, big corporates like Visa to other places like Facebook, and with such a different widespread group of people that don't necessarily want to listen to you. Do you know what I mean? If people come across our website or on our Instagram, they're coming to us because they have an interest in gut health. But when we do our corporate wellness, so when we do our talks, we've just learned so much on feedback. And for us, you know, before we started this journey, exercise for us was absolutely hammering it in a HIIT class for an hour, or sweating it in a hot yoga class, nearly fainting. And actually, when we talk about exercise at the gut stuff, it's more about movement. So, you know, what could you do in your day to get up and move? And I think lockdown taught us a lot of that. You know, that just actually getting up and walking is amazing movement, and we do take it for granted in terms of how much steps we're doing. So we always say, like, exercise snacking is quite a good way to to get moving. So when you go down and get your cup of tea or coffee, why don't you take the stairs twice? Or, if you're working from home, we're all finding it really difficult, I think, as a nation to switch off from work and home because it's so blurred now. So do you just go a quick walk around the block to reset back into home mind and instead of work? So thinking of exercise is just movement and doing what works for you, like what works for me. I like doing yoga, not even for the movement side of it. It's because I'm off the phone for an hour.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So, doing what works for you, and what works for you isn't going to work for other people. And I think Lisa and I embody that. And when it comes to food, exercise, and sleep, because we have exactly the same DNA, but we enjoy completely different things.
I think that's.
But how? Go on,
I was going to say that the problem with the wellness industry in general is that we're sold all of the stuff that we should, reformer Pilates and everything that we should be doing for well-being, when actually the stuff that doesn't make the money, like, going for a walk, and a lot of the simple tips that we say, aren't commercially driven, but are the things that our granny used to tell us. And it's not sexy and it's not fun. It's not the next new cool thing, but it's where the science is pointing. And fortunately, that is accessible to everyone. I think we have a danger of getting into a London echo chamber, which we all know we're in, by being like, oh yeah, I'm going to this reformer Pilates class here. You're just like, actually, we've lost touch with what everyone else does, and the science isn't pointing there. Yes, it's brilliant and fun to do the new cool thing, but I'm sure a lot of the people in that study were just going for a walk.
Yeah, and the thing is, the more layers of complexity we put into things, the less able we are to A, do them, and B, stick with them. Whereas, that is one of the better things to come out of the pandemic, that understanding the joy of a walk. And for me, I was always like, a walk is something that my parents inflicted on me. But I definitely am trying to just take the slightly longer route to places. Even if you add a few more steps at every given point, you're suddenly just getting a whole bunch more movement in your day. And actually, what you were saying about the HIIT classes, I err towards quite high intensity training, but what I found is that I was doing that, and then by the weekend I was so exhausted that I was going to quite the extremes and being quite sedentary. Whereas now I've tried to dial down my training a bit to make it so that my whole life can have more movement in it, rather than killing yourself on a gym class and not having anything else left.
Yeah, and I think the habitual thing that you kind of touched upon is really interesting. Like, it's a similar thing with de-stressing. Like, the wellness industry tells us that we must have a gong bath standing on our heads, and that is like one solution that's going to immediately de-stress you, instead of finding the thing every day. Like for Alana and I, like, my main way to de-stress is going down the pub with my pals and talking about everything and nothing. Like, I find that the most meditative thing in the world, because it makes me forget where I am, because I'm with my best pals talking about nonsense. And I think that, again, that can't be sold. So
No.
in the wellness industry ain't going to peddle it. But I think that, and I think a lot of it is a class issue, and all these things are seen as a middle class luxury, whereas de-stressing can be anything that helps you forget about work, or the small little things, or the walk, or whatever. And I think that those small habitual things, as you hit the nail on the head, is how we are actually going to create real change. Yes, the science is complex, and yes, the applications can be quite complex, but how we how we go about them should and needs to be simple.
So Anna Martha, who's on Instagram, a psychotherapist, she says, if instead of meditation, just go and like lie on your bed for 10 minutes. And you're like, oh yeah, I can do that. I can lie on my bed for 10 minutes. And it is surprisingly difficult, because you realise how hooked on our phones we are. But yeah, just weaving in a quick lie down with you, you can feel your nervous system sort itself out when you do that. And that is achievable and free and available to absolutely anybody.
Yeah, and our head of nutrition talks about box breathing as well. So just simply breathing in for 4, holding for 4. But it's such a simple technique. You can do it on the move. You could do it sitting at your desk, on the tube, in the car. It just sets your body into that sort of rest and digest mode again, rather than fight or flight. And we're, as a nation, constantly in fight or flight, constant stress. We've got our phones next to us. As soon as a WhatsApp notification pops up, that's sending us into fight or flight mode, because it's, stress is the same whether you're scared that the boar is going to come after you, or if the boar is actually coming after you. Your
Mm.
body doesn't know the difference between the two. And it's a big thing, and it's just more frustrating when people go, just have less stress in your life, man. It's fine.
If only. What I don't understand is how stress and your microbiomes link up. Because of, what is it? Because you've got adrenaline, or because what's going on?
So both. It's so our gut and brains, like we've always kind of known they're linked. Like if you see the person you fancy, you get butterflies in your stomach. Gut instinct, all those things are, well within our vocabulary, and we feel them all the time. And so we kind of used to think that that was just, from the brain down. But what we're now realizing is they're linked by something called the vagus nerve, which unfortunately has nothing to do with Las Vegas. And realizing that the signals two ways. So what goes on in our gut doesn't just stay in our gut and can actually affect our brain as well. So we think of the vagus nerve as kind of like the phone line. So they're communicating with each other both ways. They're also communicating via neurotransmitters, which is like the WhatsApp. So things like serotonin is actually produced and found in our gut. Dopamine, that's the reward hormone if you get a like on Instagram, and GABA, which is your calming hormone. And they're speaking to each other constantly. And there's so much new exciting science coming out about that, and about how microbes can affect things like anxiety. The thing that we always kind of caveat this with, and we work with Anxiety UK quite a lot on the things that we create around this, is that, of course, mental health is multifactorial. And as soon as people start to sensationalize it with good mood food and this bit of sauerkraut is going to cure your depression, we get into very shaky, murky, potentially dangerous waters. But I think the exciting thing is knowing the link is there. So if we start to look after our gut health, could that potentially be a tool in our armory towards our mental health? And I think that's how we have to kind of frame it. But it's really, really interesting and exciting. But I think we just have to be careful and honest about where the science is at, really.
But I loved what you said earlier. It's stuff our grannies knew. We do. Yeah, of course, your diet choices can't sort your mental health out. But on the other hand, we do know when we're eating properly, when we're putting enough vegetables in our bodies, when we're getting enough water. They are the kind of foundations for feeling good in yourself. It can't solve all your problems, but yeah, if you go the other way, too much caffeine, too much sugar, too much eating on the fly, it's the things that tips the balance the other way.
I think you're right. That's exactly right with the word foundations, and that's so important, because if we can get the foundations that are general, things like fiber, variety, then you can start to personalize it on top of that and do what works for you and what fits into your lifestyle. And I think that's super important. Like, take fiber. Like, our granddad used to be like, yep, makes me go. It's all branded to have it every day, makes me go. But I think now with fiber, we've got the why piece of why fiber is good for us. So, I think we've always sort of known that it bulks your stool and makes you go, but we now know that it feeds the bacteria in our gut. So I think that's what gut health is bringing to health and wellness. Is bringing that why piece. This is what you've got to do, but why? And then gut health is now answering those questions, which I think is a really interesting way of looking at it. So we're not saying anything new when it comes to the tips or lifestyle tips that we're given. It's just the why piece, really.
So interesting, because when I was speaking to my audience about whether they had any gut issues, and 77% said they did have, which is a huge number, and most commonly, like you said, that was IBS and bloating. And then I asked them how that made them feel, and the words like shame, frustration, embarrassment. And so it does become a kind of the lines between physical health and mental health. They're interesting, aren't they? Because they become feelings that we sit with. So they didn't so much talk about the discomfort or the physical effects. They were talking about how that felt emotionally.
Yeah, and I think that's like anything, that's kind of perpetuated by the taboo as well. Like, I just think we, people are ashamed of it. And also there's so many people that are just masking symptoms and not getting to the underlying. We've kind of normalized, running to the toilet every 2 seconds, or not pooing for 3 days, or, and I think that it's because people don't want to talk about it. And even, going to your GP about those sort of things that people just don't understand. They don't potentially have the vocabulary to say, I've got this or I don't know why. And that's, I think, we talk a lot about, we've got like poo charts and stuff like that, and just normalizing the poo chat. We talk about it all the time with dogs and babies, and we don't talk about it, as adults. And as you say, there's loads of shame around, and I think that around, bloating's a great example of it. I think that all too often, all we see about bloating is on Instagram, people going, oh, what I look like today, what I look like after food, and it's all aesthetic, rather than where there could be a potential problem, as you say, the discomfort, and things like IBS, the stigma attached to that. 1 in 5 people take time off work because of digestive issues. If that was anything else, people would be starting to, to listen and step up. And I think that the education just isn't there. We don't have it. And I think that's what, we feel most passionate about as well, is giving people the tools and the vocabulary to be able to go to their GP or be able to articulate what it is that's wrong, because it can be really debilitating.
Yeah, and also this idea that, you just have to live with it. Oh, this is just the way it is. I can't eat this. My body doesn't like this, or I need to be near a toilet then. And I mean, it's some leaps, and I don't understand the science, but if you could quite radically change your microbiome or your gut health in a couple of weeks, if all of us made steps to getting, things working better, that's got to help everything, hasn't it?
I think we've just lost the ability as well to tune in. I think, we all just want to be told what it is, what to do, basically, how to live our lives. And I think that comes from, this is probably going a bit too deep, but, I think even when we were growing up, we had, a bit more structure in that, religion, or, for us, certainly in our upbringing, it was very much like, this is what you'll do. You'll have a career, you'll be a joiner, or you work in a hairdressers or whatever, a very practical job. You'll get married, you'll have kids, have grandkids, and then you'll die. And I think it's been great. We don't have those social structures imposed on us as much as we used to in the past, but it has given us, we need to be able to now empower ourselves to do what works for us. And we've lost the ability to tune in, because I only ever tuned in with my body unless I was hungover or I was ill, or even when I went to have my baby, they were like, when's the last time you pooed? I'm like, okay, I actually own a business on this, and I actually really don't know. And I don't know what it looked like, and I think that's where we all have to start, is to tune in, and how are we feeling? And I think it's amazing, your very first question to us, how actually are you? And that comes down to physical as well.
But we're perpetually distracted, aren't we?
And we do it to ourselves.
Yeah, we really do. We really do. Again, the same Anna, the same person I referenced earlier, she's like, how often, especially if you're a mum, are you thirsty? And, I'll give myself a drink in a minute. I'll get myself a drink. Or I need a wee. Or I need the loo. I need to go. I'll go in a minute. I mean, your body is giving you these hints. If it's saying it's thirsty or it needs the toilet, that means you really ought to action it. And you wouldn't perpetually put your child off, but we do it to ourselves. And that's like the very basics of self-care. We're not talking, as you say, about gong baths. We're talking about, if you're thirsty, get yourself a glass of water. Yeah, but we miss that trick sometimes.
I think as well, it's like the kind of fast solution culture that we're in. You can get groceries to your doorstep in 5 minutes. You can get, it's like the pill for an owl, the fast culture. You can buy anything you want in minutes. You can go anywhere you want within a day around the world. And I think that actually, we need to work a bit harder at the foundation stuff, because that's what we're doing. We're having, if people have got acid reflux, they're going to a chemist and getting stuff for that, or they're just masking symptoms constantly rather than putting the work in to go, oh right, why do I think this is? And I think that's the gap between your GP and a very expensive nutritionist on Harley Street. People just don't know where to get help and don't know where to start, because it's expensive, and it's an expensive gap.
I think Sophie Medlin, a dietitian we work with, put it so well, in that she works with a lot of people with digestive issues, and she said, when you have an issue like that, or when we're talking about poo, it's literally your body screaming at you that there's something wrong.
Yes.
And so often we are just going, exactly, it's all in your head, or it'll be, see how it goes, or and I think it's just people just aren't taken seriously, and it affects. And now that we know how much it's linked to everything else, we really do need to be standing up and and taking notice. And it comes down to education as well. You know, when we first started our journey, you know, all those the years ago, and even now, people just go, "What's my gut? Do you mean my stomach?"
Mhm.
Or, you know, gut seen as a bit of a word, and then you bring poo into it, and people are like, "No, about, you know, I don't want to talk about it." And I think it needs to start there and breaking that taboo, and it'll hopefully help that conversation become a, you know, much more mainstream and talked about more.
And so if someone's listening and they're like, "Well, this you're talking to me," and by sounds of it, it will be, you know, it will be talking to lots of people. What do you do? How do you start to help your gut health?
So we always say, like, educate yourself first, because you'll find a lot of penny drop moments just by finding stuff out, like, you know, the fact that 70% of your immune system's housed in your gut and things like that. Like, I think you need to pique your own interest first, and that comes from reading up, and you need the why piece in order to take action. So our site, we wrote a book with like 18 experts in loads of different fields, so everything from dermatologists to psychologists. It's really simple. If Alana and I can read it, anyone can. But also our website is just like full of content from experts from around the world. So I'd say like that's the first step, and then the next step, you know, tuning in, starting to log stuff. We made some diaries with GPs and dietitians, and it's all really simple stuff like circle this poo. What did you have to eat today? You know, how did you feel stress? Is it like, you know, going back to basics? Because if you do go to your GP, or you want to go or feel the need to go to speak to someone about it, they will just send you away and ask you to write a diary for 6 to 12 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's good to kind of put that work in first, educating yourself, so you can go to your GP and say, look, I've had a read of this thing, you know, and I've filled out this diary. What do you think? Yeah, and then the three kind of simple principles that we say when it comes to nutrition are fiber. You know, 9 out of 10 of us don't get enough fiber. Again, loads on our website to give you tips to up that variety. So we don't know what each of our gut bacteria like yet. So we say it's like a wedding. You need to have a buffet of loads of different stuff to keep everyone happy. So they did they did a big study on 10,000 stool samples, and the kind of magic number that came out of that was 30 different types of plants a week. And you know, everyone bands it about, but there is actually a science behind it. But that includes nuts and seeds as well.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Is it part of that same study with Tim Spector that came out? Because I heard him talking about the 30. I was like, how do I possibly do that? But that's, you know, paprika, turmeric, every bit of seasoning that you put in, sesame seeds. Yeah, it's not having 30 full plants.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, and it could be like red, different colours count: red pepper, yellow pepper, green pepper. That's like stir fry.
Mixed bags of salad, mixed seeds. Like when you kind of, again, like we've got a checklist, like a plant checklist thing that you can download from our website that kind of helps to guide you a little bit. Because I think, you know, habitually you just go into the supermarket and buy the stuff that you know what to do with. And that's why things like veg boxes are great for that, because you get a wee surprise. You're like, celeriac, what on earth am I going to do with this thing? But it does help you to try new things. And then the final kind of layer on top when it comes to nutrition is ferments and fermented foods. You know, contrary to popular belief, they did not start in East London. They've been around for, you know, as food preservation for eons. But our mum used to say, "Oh, that stuff makes me gag." Absolutely not. But you know, you can start as easy as live yogurt and sauerkraut, and live yogurt and sourdough. Sorry. And, you know, when you start, you can use them as condiments and start to introduce them that way. And it is actually quite simple to start to get them in and try like a new one a week. So in terms of nutrition there, and then, you know, the other things is just like, as we said, you know, sleep, movement, stuff that we all know. There's so many studies in science, like the exercise one's a prime example of that it's not just nutrition that can affect and improve our microbes. There's other things too. And I think that it's all the general well-being stuff that we know we should probably get round to one day. But the science is so exciting. And I think when you read up more about it, it encourages you to do it because you know why you're doing it. It's not because an influencer's told you to. It's because it's backed by actual science.
We always say, like, for initially, just pick one. Like, I think we're all used to that diet culture of going 180 and completely changing, and then we all just fall off the wagon. It's like, just pick one of them, like up your fiber, and it changes all the time. Like we're still working on it as well. Like this week I'm like, hydration, I have to drink more. I don't drink enough. So I got this big, huge 2.1 litre tankard from Amazon. And I was like, right, I know I need to get through that today. And it's always evolving and changing in different parts of different things of life. So don't overwhelm yourself. Like we say, like just pick one. Pick one and do it for a couple of weeks and see how you get on.
Yeah, and I think actually when we're talking about well-being, it can be misconstrued to kind of getting to these goals, or and definitely very visual goals, but actually something like drinking more water or adding more vegetables in, which is something I've been really trying to do. And once I've become conscious of it, when I've got my dinner in front of me, I was like, what other veg can I put in this, even if it's some slices of cucumber, like as I do for my kids basically. But you do that, and you do it as kind of a long-term thing to kind of add in, rather than, I'm going to do this for 6 weeks and then X is going to happen. You need to be trying to drink more water indefinitely, don't you?
Yeah, and I think as well, like I think in our 20s we probably said, I don't give a shit about my health. Do you know what I mean? But starting to think about prevention is key, and the big wake up moment for us, we started the gut stuff as a YouTube series back in the day, and one of the scientists told us, like, it's not just what you eat affects you, it affects your kids and your grandkids. That's what you're passing down. And I was like, whoa. Okay. Now we really need to do something about, we need to start thinking about it. So that was definitely a catalyst.
But it's mad that we've inherited that as well. It's come, that is actually come down to us as well.
I know we've inherited the worst Scottish genetics you could
we had an uphill climb. I mean, we not this is not a lie. For our school lunch at high school, for our snack we'd have a Greg's sausage roll, and then at lunchtime we'd have a chip butty, a Greg softie, pick a mix, and probably 10 Lambert and Butler.
Yeah, I was going to say.
However many Lambert and Butler we could smoke in the half hour walking back.
Again, I think that's why Tim used us quite a lot initially, because he was like,
these ones are bad.
Rock bottom.
If the baseline is so low.
I bet it. I mean, that is a nostalgia. I used to get £2 lunch money, and I somehow used to be able to get cheesy chips and 10 sovereign and a Twix from the vending machine.
Can Iron Brew, job's done.
And I feel like I felt all right off it.
Yeah.
The young body is amazing at what it can kind of do.
But then I think that you sort of start to think, what has that done for, over the time? But then that's why, with the microbes being able to change, not much you can do about your genetics, but, changing them so quickly is exciting and empowering. Yeah. And I hope that people walk away from listening to this podcast not feeling overwhelmed, but feeling invigorated and empowered, and it spikes interest.
Yeah, and it's accessible, isn't it? That's the thing. I think that's what's really important. This is, as you say, often these things get wrangled into some kind of trend or dialed into a place that feels like it isn't for everyone. But yeah, live yogurt is a really easy choice to make, and it's a classic thing. If you look at the food categories, that probably would have been closer to what our grandparents were eating, and then it all got too complicated, too many options, and you just want to go quite back to basics.
Yeah,
and even when you go pick up that live yogurt, pick up a different one every time you go to the supermarket, because each one will have different types of bacteria in it. So pick the one that's on offer, if you want to do accessibility. But I think as well, I think where I think the gut stuff has resonated is that, Lisa and I were not and are not angels. And, when we first set it up, our mum was like, you're being too preachy with that. You're being too preachy with that. And actually, we tried to do our best to not sensationalize it and not have it so that it's, it should be, inspirational, not aspirational. And the health and well-being industry should be that. And I think that's where it has went wrong in trying to make, systematic change so far.
Yes, I think you're right.
Hence why there's a massive chapter on alcohol in the book, because we had a liver specialist from UCL. That chapter had to be cut down significantly because Alana and I asked too many questions. Like, touch of red wine, how much red wine?
What did that teach you about the impact of alcohol on microbiome?
So, red wine... red wine's a good example of it because it's high in polyphenols, which our gut bacteria love, but obviously the alcohol bit of red wine not so good, and it's just like the boring thing of moderation, like that's what came out of it. And actually your microbes can help you metabolize alcohol, and people metabolize alcohol differently, which we've all kind of known, but it was really interesting to learn it, because people always, and like kind of in terms of gut permeability and all the things that we've known about craving rubbish food and salt and sugar and whatever the next day. And it was kind of like stuff that we'd known, but we had a scientist sitting in front of us that we could ask all the questions to.
That's what's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm just learning about glucose, which again feeds into all of this, and like that pasta will spike your glucose, but if you've put like salad and vegetables in your stomach first, that it metabolizes it differently, and so many of the things we kind of, it goes back to this instinct in your gut feeling on things. We kind of do sometimes know what feels right, but we don't really know why it's right and what it actually is doing.
Yeah, and I think it's, as you like, you need that bit to underpin and actually get you to do it. Like for me personally as well, like I'm like, all right, why though, or whatever. It just sort of like you need the kind of bigger picture piece of the pie to be like, all right, okay. Like I think for us, our dad died of a heart attack in his 50s, and I've got no doubt that the combination of being excited about the science and also knowing that if he'd known some of this stuff, I would still be here, I'm sure. So there's like a bit of that extra, I guess, kick up the bum, or, sad reason why we continue to do it. But I think it's probably subconsciously been more of a driver than we think.
Well, I think that's really important to say. I think with all of this, with movement, with good food choices, we forget that the reason we do that is because we like to live longer. That exercise shouldn't be, of course, about fitting into any genes. It's trying to keep your body moving and being in the best way possible. And we forget that is the end point.
And I think I hate the word thrive with a passion, but it is about not just existing. And I think we probably, I think that really shifted for us as we went through this. You can feel good. You can feel, you can have energy, and you don't just have to exist and get through life and, have treat days and hold yourself back and restrict things and then have treat days. And, I think, it is. And that's why where the science and gut health is so exciting, be it complex, it always comes back to behavioural change.
And the kind of the eat like me, look like me culture needs to be gone.
Yeah, because look at you two, you look like each other, you're genetically similar, but your bodies need different stuff.
Yeah, and
we actually did a recent study on glucose spikes, glucose levels, spiking glucose, and we spike at the complete opposite things.
Do you?
Yeah, and I'm always a stone heavier even when we're on the same diets, and that's to do with the composition of our gut bacteria. Even when we do exactly the same things in the studies, I do. When we're not on the studies, I probably do like a lot more cheese and wine than Alana has. But I'm out on the town more than Alana is these days, so it's probably a bit to do with it. But it's interesting that there's so even for us, if we went on some stupid,
you're never going to get the same results.
We're never going to get the same results.
It just shows the madness of it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not sexy or fun, and you're not making boatloads of cash from it. Which a lot of people are selling nonsense, but there's a bigger, like all this. It's just the simple stuff, like you said. It's just there's no other way to do it.
We have lived through both sides of the coin. Being the DJs on Love Island, seeing that side of it, and then moving into the gut stuff world. Thinking about it from the inside out rather than the outside in was a very hard shift.
Yeah,
it took us a long time, and I really hope that we're piloting on the school curriculum just now, which is amazing. I was at the school last week, and if we can really start doing that grassroots stuff to educate kids so that they'll grow up inherently thinking about the inside out rather than exactly what they look like, I think is one of the only ways that we can do it, apart from us trying to shout it from every rooftop that's physically possible.
Well, again, it's so true, isn't it? And I try and do that with my kids when I'm talking about food. You don't want good or bad food, but I do try and shine a light on how how whatever they're choosing to eat is making them feel. That's the thing that I'm trying to land with them, because we don't want to be in a place where you can and can't have things, but actually if your body really doesn't enjoy eating that, even if you think it does, you've got to be conscious of that.
Yeah, and we've all had that, pizza on a Tuesday night when we can't be, two for Tuesday thing. You're like, oh God, and you wake up every Wednesday morning and go, oh, how did I do it? You know what I mean? But just having, and that is acknowledging that as well. I think, we don't have to be. It's not a destination.
No.
Do you know what I mean? It's a journey, and it changes throughout your life as well. When I was pregnant, I thought about more things than I did when I wasn't, and then as we're weeding at the minute, which is a messy affair, but starting to think about that as well. I think and it changes throughout your life, and it's important to acknowledge that as well.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating, isn't it? I could get deeply obsessed with let's be truthful, I am going to get deeply obsessed. That's a kind of person I am. So I think we kind of covered it broadly. If anyone's thinking about what to do next, as you say, kind of observe things a bit more, begin to try and join the dots yourself, try some of these what seemingly quite easy changes, go and see your site. And I love that, pick up a different yogurt each time, get pink apples one time and green the next, because that is infinitely achievable. And actually then it also, I found with the trying to get more vegetables in, I kind of found it quite fun to challenge myself a bit and not like be weighed down by the prospect of it.
Yeah, I think as well, it's the kind of experimentation thing is nice to have in your life, with especially with something that we have to do, that we do every day with food, is like coming out of those rigid structures helps with the with the things that we think we know, and it's just nice to just try new stuff again.
It's mad. Like, remember, like back, it's not even that long ago, and it was like meal prep, and you'd have meal prep the same thing for the, you used to look at it and go, oh God, that again.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Like, what a negative way to eat.
But again,
what were we thinking?
Your body is kind of telling you something, isn't it? Like, you can have similarities and things that you go back to, but we're not made to be. And obviously, of course, things being seasonal, that actually, if we're in tune with that, that does happen naturally. I was also thinking the problem is as well, because we all shop online now, you just literally do that click, whereas if you do go to a supermarket, you are drawn to different things. So we're kind of increasingly separated from the experience, aren't we?
Yeah, the kind of browsing.
Yeah.
Oh, I quite fancy this or I quite fancy that. It's kind of gone.
My body's telling me to buy that, whereas I'm just like, oh, it arrives and this is what I eat.
Yeah.
It's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you, ladies. I've got 2 more questions for you. Number 1, where can people find you? And is there anything particular you want to shout about?
Just thegutstuff.com is the easiest place. We've got loads of stuff. As I said, like there's a kind of, all the information about the science from like a really basics perspective, but we've also got an I've got a problem, puns galore, section on the site where signposts out to people if you have got an issue, like where you can go to seek help. And then we have, loads of stuff on there, like the books. We've the diaries that I mentioned before. We have fiber bars to help top up your fiber content. We've got fermenting kits if you want to try that out. All the stuff that you need on there, and then it's just the gut stuff on every platform, keeping it simps.
Yeah, you're easy to find, and it's all very nicely branded. And then the second question is, and you can obviously both answer this, if you could have an honest conversation with one person, who would it be, and what would you say?
Probably each other.
Yeah, I was just going to say probably each other. Like we rarely speak to each other as sisters.
We need to we carve out time. We carve out time now with a margarita. We have like sister margarita time, because we're either talking about work or Alana's baby. So I'm absolutely
she's genetically half Lisa's. Which is mad.
My favorite.
My child is genetically half Lisa's because we've got the same DNA. Which is mad. Yeah.
My bairn.
Mind blown. So I'm like, do you want to do the night feeds if she's yours? But totally.
But it's mad as well because she is. I'm obviously obsessed with her. She's like my favorite thing in the whole world. I don't know. I don't remember life without that lassie. And she sits on it. I'm just like, you're the best thing in the whole world. I just love you so much. But she also looks at me like, looks like mum, sounds like mum, no milk. But she settles with me. So she like, it's something in her nose, because she just like, I was babysitting her for the first time, and she went to her bed on time. She took a bottle. She just kind of knew. She was like, oh yeah, I love you as well.
You'll do.
Yeah,
that's so cool. I mean,
it's
you
like
get
the
ultimate auntie role, because you haven't, you've not done any of the having a baby bit.
Yeah, and she looks exactly like me.
Yeah, so
it's so weird. She's got our face. Nuts.
It's so weird. I've never thought about that.
So yeah, each other.
weird.
Maybe do it on Saturday night, actually. Margarita.
Yeah, I think we're going to over Easter we've said like no work chat, and we didn't want to work together ever. Like we went to separate unis in different countries. It just happened to be that we worked together. We're the complete opposite each other. We thought at first this is absolute hell, and then over the 10 years we've started to realize what each other's strengths and weaknesses are, and it sort of works now. But yeah, I think this weekend we'll do it. We'll have an open, honest, frank conversation with a margarita, Lisa.
We'll let you know, Clemmy.
You both wanted to answer that, though. It was.
I know.
It's weird. Twins are cool. Thank you, ladies. It's been really, really educational, and I think I'm going to drill into this, which means that it will change stuff for me, and I hope it does for people listening too. You're doing great work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's been a pleasure. Look at that, Steve. I'm like a professional